Hey Wargamers, today I want to talk about investing or scalping in Warhammer as a hobby and how it's kind of weird in that regard. So, over the weekend, the Grey Knights went up for pre-order. That includes a new codex, new battle force. The battle force is the Sanctic Conclave battle force, which looks pretty cool, right? And of course, it sold out on the Games Workshop website really quickly. And this is itself isn't abnormal, but the weird thing is if we look at secondary marketplaces like eBay, for example, we can still get our hands on this product, and we can still get our hands on this product for less than MSRP, right? So it's going for 240 in the US right now. I can see it on eBay for 227 right now, plus shipping, but still, like, that's below market price. So what's the deal? Like, why is that? That's kind of weird. And the reason why I say that's weird is because hobbies are luxury goods, right? We're using our disposable income, the income that we have, that's not allocated for things like rent or mortgages or food or gas, right? The essential things that we need to spend money on. Hobbies are luxuries. They are things that we get to spend our money on if we are so fortunate to have additional money to do that with, right? And the price for luxury goods, especially things like hobbies, are driven by demand for that hobby, which in the case of Warhammer is really because people like playing the game. They like the idea of pushing models around the board. They like the painting aspects. They like the community. The list goes on and on, right? But that fandom is what drives demand. It isn't based on some inherent quality of the good, right? It's about the fandom. And people are often willing to pay elevated prices because of that fandom, because the products are unique, right? Like, I'm really into Tau, and if I came upon a particular Tau thing that cost a bunch of money, I might pay a higher price than normal just because I have that kind of dedication to that particular IP, right? And so we don't see super high elasticity in prices or elasticity in demand because people are willing to pay high prices for things they think are just really cool. Um, and when you combine that with scarcity, we can see prices going really high in a lot of different hobbies. And in particular, I think about Pokemon right now. So my kids are at an age where they're really into Pokemon, and sometimes when we go to Target or to our FLGS, they'll get a pack of Pokemon cards, or at least that's the way it used to be, right? And now you can't find product, right? People are following the stalkers around. Stalkers, like the people that do the stocking, not the STOCK stock, right? They're following the stalkers around, uh, and pulling the product right off the shelf as soon as it gets put out there, right? And you just can't find product, and so there's immense scarcity, and combined with that high demand, we see market prices at about double MSRP. Whether you're at a big box store like Target or Walmart, you're not able to find it. If you're able to find it at a local game store, either there's really strict controls on how much you can buy, which I think is the way to do it, or I've been to game stores where they are charging market price for these products, and you just can't find it, and you have this combination of not being able to find it and really high prices, which makes sense from an economic standpoint. But what about Warhammer? Like, why don't we see that with Warhammer? Like, for these Grey Knights, why is the price for a Grey Knights Battle Force not much higher? It's below MSRP. How does that happen? What is the deal with Warhammer that makes it stand out as a contrast for something like Pokemon? And ultimately, why is Warhammer probably a bad financial investment, but a really good investment from the standpoint of just being a cool hobby and like protecting yourself against scalpers and things like that. And so the reason for this is that Warhammer doesn't really appreciate. You can't really improve the value of a box by holding on to it for a long time. It doesn't really happen. If you buy a box of Space Marines today and hold on to it for 5 years, you're not really going to be able to sell it for that much more. And that's because of three things, I think. One is that they have continued printing, so that maintains supply, that keeps supply up. That's different than something like Pokemon, where there's a limited print run. Maybe they do one or two, but they're not going to just continue printing it for a decade. There's a limited supply, but in Warhammer that's not true. Games Workshop will continue produce kits for a long period of time. And so you're able to maintain supply even though there might be some shocks to the market, temporary supply shortages. For the most part, the supply is there one way or another. Additionally, retailers generally sell at below MSRP. So a lot of retailers are not going to be selling at the same price that you would pay from the GW web store. They're going to give you, a 10% discount, a 15% discount, give you some sort of loyalty, frequent shopper discount, that sort of thing. And so you can get, below MSRP pretty easily. And so you have a lower starting price as well. And then finally, updated sculpts put expiration dates on the old ones, right? So something like the new Farsight model, for example, immediately when that came out, made the old one obsolete. Now, there's an interesting case with that, with things like the drop pod, right? So the drop pod is in a weird situation right now where they came out with a new drop pod, and they said, okay, this new drop pod is for 40K, the old one is no longer for 40K, and then just recently they came out and said, we're going to use the old drop pod for Horus Heresy, though. So, that's that's weird, right? Like, that's a thing where, yes, they're putting expiration date on the old one, but they're repurposing it for a different system. But for the most part, when a model is replaced, the old one is defunct. And that super undermines the demand for that model, for that product. And that's important because the demand for these things is driven by the rule set more than the inherent qualities of the sculpt or the build or anything like that, right? Like, I love the Farsight model because it's just a really cool model. But a big part of whether I'm going to decide to buy other models is based on the rules, right? I'll buy a Farsight because there's only one that I'm going to have in my army and it's cool and everything like that. But, like Fire Warriors or Stealth Suits or Kroot, I might buy one, but the thing that determines whether or not I'm going to buy 2 or 3 or 4 is the rules. And that's really where the flexibility and demand comes in, is if there are rules that make that item desirable. And so as rules change, demand changes too. And that means that there's really fluctuating demand and unpredictable demand for some of these products over time, which also means that they're not going to reliably appreciate. It's hard for us to anticipate whether or not something's going to, be good next data slate or not. And so that means that we don't see appreciation, we don't see investment like this. And by far and large, players outnumber collectors, right? This wouldn't be the case if collectors were driving demand for these products. If people wanted, these things just because they're cool models, like in the case of Gunpla, then maybe we would see appreciation. But because people are, for the most part, responding to the game system more so than the models themselves, we see demand be variable over time. And so when Games Workshop discontinues rules or makes rules, less favorable, then the demand drops. So for example, on Va, right? On Va, as as a game piece was pretty good, but then it got discontinued with the latest codex. He was written out of the rules, and so demand drops. And so it's not like, if you have an unbound model that suddenly it's going to be worth 10 times what it was just because now it's out of print. No, like there's really low demand, and yeah, there's a low supply too, but that doesn't mean that there's going to be a high price. It's going to be pretty much in the ballpark of what it was before. I see this too with like my Wood Elf collection in Warhammer Fantasy, right? Like I had an extensive Wood Elf collection. I still do. I've actually built it pretty successfully over the past couple of years because people are willing to sell these, quote unquote, defunct models at a discount because they don't have rules to support them anymore. And so I've been able to build my Wood Elf collection as a consequence of this mechanism as well. And yeah, it's not like if I try to sell some of that Warhammer now, I'm going to suddenly get a really good price. I'm not even actually going to get the price that the re-released Wood Elf for the old world armies are going to get, right? Like the packaging even is out of date, and so people automatically are more skeptical of it. They're not willing to pay the same price, right? Like you're not selling. I'm not selling that stuff at the market price for the new releases, right? Because it's not a new release; it's an old release. So it's really weird, right? Like we just don't see this appreciation in Warhammer. The only exception is for limited edition things, and that's the key, right? Is because previous stuff I continued printing that really maintains a large supply, but limited edition things, especially like in Black Library, you can see a little bit of scalping, right? But it's at a pretty small margin, right? Like, so Elemental Council, for example, Black Library book about Tau, cool story. You can find it on eBay at a kind of high price, but it's not insanely expensive. And even so, even though I can't get a hard copy book at MSRP, I can still get it via other formats. I can get the audiobook. I can get the audiobook. I can get the ebook, like the PDF. You can get those things, other ways. And so all these things I think come together to make Warhammer a really good hobby for hobbyists because you can still get those products over time. You can get them at, yes, a high price because it's an expensive hobby, but it's not one that's getting blasted out of proportion by things like scalping or investors, which I think as a player, as a collector, is good because it gives me time to work with what I have, get new models as I want them. There's not this, positive feedback loop of FOMO and high demand and scalping and, just like dealing with this rat race that is, collecting in some of these other hobbies. So I think that's actually a really good thing for us as players and as hobbyists is that while there are exceptions, you can generally get what you want at about the same price, which is good. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Have you had experiences like this or experiences unlike this? Like, or am I totally off base here? I don't think so, but let me know. Yeah, and let's have the conversation in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching and happy wargaming.